All right, everyone, welcome to episode 14 of the podcast. I'm Chris.
I am Phil. We are one away from that elusive 15.
So we can syndicate our podcast.
Finally.
Once we get to 15.
Today, we took a different approach.
Some would say a stronger approach to the podcast.
Some would say probably a better approach
than
just freewheeling it from start to finish. We had a very specific topic. Since you came up with the topic, I will let you say it on the intro.
Wow, thank you so much, Phil. So today we talked about boss battles.
Okay, that's enough talking for you.
Thanks.
Now, continue.
We talk about boss fights in games, bosses in general, or we'll call them boss levels.
Yeah. We each compiled a short list of bosses that stood out in memory. Not necessarily a top list or a favorite list. Just when we heard the topic, we both kind of jotted down some notes. Either they're bosses from personal demons that we exercised, or
sometimes literally.
Yeah, literally, or they're just bosses that we felt would make good conversation pieces. And then let us know if you like this episode.
Yeah. Also, so there is some audience participation that we throw out at the end of the episode. So if you make it that far, then
if you're still awake,
good for you.
Yeah. But let us know if you like these types of episodes, or if you prefer the ones in the here and now, because then we can kind of...
Yeah, if you like the more topic structure-based episodes, the sort of list episodes or segment-based episodes better, let us know.
Yeah. So enjoy, and then we expect your feedback post-tense.
Otherwise, we're going to stop releasing these podcasts to the public, and we're just going to listen to them ourselves.
Yeah. That'd really...
Take that, Internet.
That'd really get them geese boiling. Happy Thanksgiving.
That would be a good sign-off if I knew what you just said. All right, guys. See ya. Bye. Thanks for listening. This is just between you and me. So...
That's a good enough intro for me. My name's Phil.
I'm Chris.
And this is episode 23.
Yep, that was close. 14. We finally got to 14. I'll just use the audio of you saying 14 from 2 episodes ago.
Episode 41 of the podcast.
Yep. We're just one away from the 15 goal, where the microphones will be
paid for.
Yeah, and we can just break them then and
get new ones. Yeah, and then we can set a new goal.
Yeah, 3 months with the same microphones, that's unheard of.
Poor people.
Yeah.
Obviously we got to get solid gold mics first of all, because these not solid gold.
I mean, we both have ones we wear around our chains, around our necks and stuff.
Oh yeah,
but we need ones that are functional.
Yeah, that one. The sound quality of yelling into it doesn't do anything.
No, doesn't stop us from trying.
Even when I put it into my disk drive in my computer.
That's probably why you need a new computer.
Yep. Good stuff.
So let's talk about some news.
Sure. News me up.
So we don't really have any news to talk about today. So let's just jump into the topic.
Sure. So, Today we're going to do a little special episode, guys.
We're going to try to have a topic.
Yeah. We don't do this often.
No.
And we'll probably never do it again after the outcome of this episode. We don't even know about it.
We don't even know.
But we are going to talk about bosses.
Yes, bosses in video games.
Yeah.
Not like your boss at work.
We're going to talk about bosses at work. Actually, can I rewind it?
Yeah.
Yep. I got some news.
Okay.
But it's not really news.
Okay.
I would like to talk about headset etiquette.
Please.
For people playing games. And first, I need to paint the scene. It's a viral month. As we've talked about in the last episode.
And we didn't really explain it that well, but what it is several games have viral achievements, which means that you need to kill somebody or do something with somebody that already has that achievement, and then it spreads that way.
And it all stems from, like, most of them are, like, play with somebody who worked on the game.
Right.
Play with or kill someone.
Yeah.
And then so obviously it starts off and only, 5 people have it. But then all those 5 people get killed by one person, and now you have 10 people, and so you can kill 10. And it eventually balloons to where you'd believe that anyone who ever plays the game would eventually get it.
Yeah.
Some of that's true. Other times they can be a real doozy.
Yeah, it depends how many developers or game makers actually played the game originally, and it also how many people overall are playing the game.
Yeah, and it also depends on sometimes it's just like
broken
beat.
Yeah.
It's not just like do one kill. It'll just be like win a match against them, and maybe they play but they win the match and then no one gets it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was viral month. And I shouldn't admit this on the podcast that's widely listened to, but during my work hours, because I work from home, I decided to pop in real quick, join a Red Dead Redemption.
Let's say on your lunch break.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's say a lot of things.
Yeah.
Let's say I also got dressed that day.
Yeah.
People were just throwing out lies.
Let's say I had pants on.
Yeah. And Red Dead's viral is real simple. Kill somebody who has the achievement. There's 2 different modes for Red Dead. It's like a free roam, and then there's like an actual like death match.
Yeah, multiplayer.
And you can get the kill in either. Free roam, which is there's people just kind of wandering around doing missions.
How often are you killing people that you encounter in this story? Like other players?
In free roam?
Yeah. Like I feel like you wouldn't just know to turn and shoot somebody.
Well, no, okay. So like you actually have to go into a multiplayer game.
Okay.
Like when you're playing single player, it doesn't load other players in.
Right, because it's an older game.
Yeah, you actually have to go to like public free roam.
Okay.
And then there's people walking around that they have big icons over their head,
Yeah.
Texas Two-Step Joey, and whatever.
Texas Two-Step.
So most of these, I guess, setups, these viral ones that are, at least for this month, they're just ran by somebody who already has it, who's passing it along, who's being nice. Session is only supposed to take about a half hour. Because literally you go in, you get the kill, you get it, you get out. And just the cycle of all these people. Real cut and dry. 20 minutes in to when the start time was happening, no one has sent a message. So I messaged the guy, and I'm just like, hey, is this still happening? Are you not online? Basically, should I turn off my Xbox because I should be working, or my lunch break's about to end?
Yep, either or.
Either or. Or are you like, do you need me to send you a friend request? Whatever it is. And so he immediately pulls me into a party with a couple other people, and he's having some system issues. So he's trying to work through that, which is fine, whatever. It happens.
Yep.
So in the meantime, I'm just doing a public free roam, happen to kill somebody, get it. It's the first person I kill. They weren't even trying to avoid me. It's almost like they didn't think I was going to shoot them in the face with a shotgun.
Right. In free roam.
Yeah, in free roam. So I get it. But because I'm a nice guy, the other guy can't get it started. No one can join. So I'm just like, hey.
You can run it.
Let me, I'm having fine connection issues. I'll run it. Get in a public free roam. Everyone can kill me. Then once somebody kills me, then you can kill them. And it'll just make it go faster. So the host immediately drops out. He just needed a reason to leave, which is fine. Gets out. This is my first time playing Red Dead. The map, free roam map, is huge.
Yeah.
And not everyone starts in the same spot. And I didn't know that there's little transport stations that you can walk to that can then fast travel.
Yeah.
I start at one end of the map. Everyone else essentially starts at the other. And they all have to kill me. So I'm just like, everyone stay put. It makes sense for me to come to you. There's this one guy. And now I have to get to the part where it's actually the mic's annoying. There's this one guy. And I'm not going to say a foreigner. Because that would be wrong. But it's a Frenchman. So I'm going to call him out.
He's not from America, so...
And he is just reading off everything that is happening to him in the game in the party chat. Obviously...
he knows his mic's on, right? It's
he
not
knows
like he's narrating to himself.
No, it's not like he's telling his wife, I'm going to have, mac and cheese. He's just like, okay, I'm standing next to Joey. Okay, we're at this town. okay, it looks like another person's here. His Mike. Like, I'm obviously not going to use the real tags. And that's fine at first. And like, I'm just like, okay, I'm on the way. I'll be there in whatever, 5 minutes. Just give me some time. I stole a horse. I'm riding there. And he's like, okay, is that you? Nope, that's Tom. Okay, there's Bill. All right, looks like we got Steve. Oh, Steve shot me. And I'm just like, okay, I'm freaking going there.
Yeah.
And then so, like, finally one of the other guys talks, and he's just like, hey, I died. I respawned. I'm kind of close to you. How about I get to kill you, and then we can both, it'll make everything go faster. Like, perfect. So, this guy kills me. He's fine. He starts riding over. We ride over there. And the guy's still, the whole time, we're trying to coordinate other things. And he's still just telling us...
Yeah, when you have a lot of people in the party trying to talk. Yeah.
He's just telling us everything that's happening to him in the world that doesn't apply to the game. Well, it applies to the game, but not what you're doing. Importance. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm at the top of a hill. Does anyone, just like, shut up. And I guess what I want to get at is that I hate a couple people on the mics, and I need to get this out here.
Yep.
Because, first of all, everyone, I don't need to cover the fact that, if you're an 8-year-old boy, everyone hates you on the mic.
Yeah.
That's nothing new.
No.
But I feel like if you're going to be in a party chat, if you're going to talk with your friends, again, it doesn't matter. All your friends know that you're a douchebag. You want to make your jokes. Do whatever you're going to do. When you're talking to other people, you should only, A, talk when spoken to, or B, have something useful to contribute that is game-related, or useful to contribute to the topic being discussed.
Yeah.
If you are not the host.
Yeah, for these game sessions especially. Yeah. It's not like you're just randomly paired with people and you're just talking to them. It's like, okay, we're all here for literally one specific function. Yeah. So if it doesn't help us achieve that goal, don't say anything. I mean, you can just have conversations and stuff. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if you said, if he's dominating the chat where nobody else can actually communicate to do what you need to do, that's not okay.
And also, I mean, this is just rewind 2 seconds in, before, when I'm setting up the match to have everyone come in, everyone else is in a match, and he is in that match, and then so I join, and then he, for some reason, leaves, and he's like, oh, I was disconnected. I'll create a new one and invite you in. Just you, meaning me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Everyone is already in this match.
Yeah.
You join this one. And he's just like, oh, no, I'll create one. And, everyone in the chat's trying to tell him, no, you don't understand what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Not only you need to get this. It's just he was completely, unwilling to understand what anyone is saying and let anyone talk. Right. He also, had to make sure that, he got the kill and, he sat there and he was, the seconds were ticking by that he was waiting for the achievement to pop. He's just like, oh,
no,
it hasn't popped yet. Hasn't popped yet. I'm like, maybe you already got it because it was pretty quick for the other guy. And he's just like, oh, no, here it is. Got it. God damn it. You didn't need to say this.
Yeah.
You just say if you don't get it within these, 20 seconds. But I need to go, if you're going to be a douchebag, you can trash talk. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just make it tasteful. And if you feel like you
or
need
at least
to talk.
Funny.
Yeah. Also, don't have your Connect mic on. Ever. And have anything else in the world happening in that room.
Right.
If you have a dog, don't have your Connect mic on. Yeah. Because I don't need to hear your dog barking in the background every time it does.
Yeah, never have your Connect as your primary mic. The only time you're acceptable is if something else happened with your actual mic and it's last ditch just so you can talk to somebody.
Yeah, but then you're playing in a quiet room.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not against I am against children. I hate children. And babies.
Yeah.
And everyone.
Puppies.
If you have a baby in the room and it is, let's say, not sleeping, don't have your Connect mic on.
Right.
I don't need to listen to your entire baby's crying situation because you don't want to mute it. And then we can't mute you because it's a session that we need communication for. That's the thing. If you were a random person and you have your Connect mic on, mute it immediately.
Yep.
I never need to hear anything that you're going to say. It's not going to be worthwhile. But instead, I have to sit there and listen to, you and your wife have a whole conversation about what you're making for dinner, and the baby's crying and the dog's barking, and then everyone else just has to sit and wait till that's done, so then we can go, everyone meet over here.
Right.
We're gonna.
Do you know how many conversations I've ever heard especially when the Kinect first came out, where people didn't realize that it was a microphone that picked up everything in the room. So you'd be playing with it, there would be like 5 or 6 people in the room with somebody else you're playing against, and you just hear them all talking like nonstop while you're trying to play a game.
Yeah.
Super annoying.
Yeah. Vent over. That made me mad for the rest of the day. I went back to work. That guy, and it doesn't seem like a lot. If you listen to the story, you're just like.
But that's the thing. I totally understand, because just going through that Bulletstorm session, it was similar to the fact where he was just constantly talking.
Yeah.
And he was having a conversation about American politics, which one had nothing to do with what we were talking about, with what we were trying to do, but also made it so nobody else could talk to each other when we were trying to communicate. And he did it for like 4 hours, and he wasn't actually helping because he didn't care, because he already had the achievement, so he was just messing around the whole time.
Yeah.
So it was, I'm still mad about that, and that was like months ago.
I went back to work and started working, and I immediately took it out on any coworker that got in range. I'm just like, do you know how much I hate the trash that you're sending me? Like, I can't, you're sending me garbage. I'm not going to work it anymore. And just like blowing up at people because it's just like one guy just refused to shut his mouth. And I got mad at him on the chat. And I'm just like, you're not helping anybody. Please shut up.
Yeah.
Because since it's not a session that I'm running, I don't care.
Right.
Like, you can't be mad at me because
you helped out.
I helped out. You wouldn't have gotten this if it wasn't for me. But at the same time, it's just like, you need to shut your mouth before I kill you.
I have a feeling that he was in matches before, in sessions before, and would never say anything. And so somebody at one point said, no, you need to tell me what you're doing all the time. I need to know what's happening so we can help you. And then it turned into him overcompensating and just not stop talking.
Like, I think there was a grand total, besides me and him, maybe one other person talked. Because no one else could have a chance.
They probably just turned off their mic.
Yeah, and it's fine. Like, there wasn't that much coordination. It's really just like, I got to get to you, and then we'll just take turns, everyone kill me. But just like him just describing, like, okay, by this guy, and he's standing here. Should I kill him? Like, no. Is his name match my name? That's not going to get you anything. Right. It's just going to make him spawn somewhere else.
Yeah, that's another thing about that raid, too, is when the last day we tried to do it, there was like Xbox problems with the party. The party chat kept crashing and things like that.
Yeah.
So we tried to do it a couple times without being able to talk. And because we had done it so many times, we were pretty decent at it. But
I believe it.
Yeah.
All right, now let's go into our topic. Topic of work bosses. I mean, video game bosses.
Yeah, we're just going to vent for a couple minutes about our bosses.
It's going to turn into a different kind of podcast.
So bosses are something that have existed in games since the very beginning.
But I also
when I say very beginning, I mean slightly after the beginning. It depends what you consider the beginning. There was no boss in Pong. There was no boss in Pac-Man even.
No.
Or did Space Invaders? It sort of did.
Space Invaders kind of did.
Anyways, for decades now, bosses have been a staple of video games.
Yes.
And
I feel like it's dying down.
Yes, I agree with that. But I still think that we should talk about them.
Okay.
Oh, God damn it, Phil. No, you don't have to do it. Do you have to respond to that? Or?
No, I think it's just somebody updating me on the Bulls game.
Oh, okay. So bosses can serve many functions, I feel like.
Yeah.
So bosses sort of drive the story of a game, and then once you actually get to fight them, it's either a conclusion to that story, or it's a way to change up the gameplay, or it's a way for developers or people making the game to sort of force emotion or reason for something sometimes.
Mm-hmm. What I'll say is, here's how we did, just so the audience is aware. Initially, we both wrote down just bosses that came to mind that were either some of our favorite bosses or just bosses of notable mention.
Just that we remember after years.
And then, so it'll start off as probably a list of like, here's the bosses I thought about, but then as ones come up, we might go more into depth about like that particular, not that boss, like we're not going to say like Bowser and then just talk about Bowser for 10 hours. Yeah. We might be like, here's what he meant in that game, and here's what bosses that are similar to him have done.
Right.
we'll try and go small picture to big picture.
Yeah, we're trying to, rather than just reading a list off, we want to kind of use it as talking points to get to bigger issues or whatever we think of when we talk about stuff. But yeah, the reason I started thinking about this originally a couple episodes ago was because playing Destiny, there's kind of bosses every once in a while. If you get to the end of a long level, you'll fight a boss. And then it just reminded me of the way that Bungie has done bosses in the past, which is typically not at all.
Yeah.
Except for a couple moments in Halo 2 when they decided to do bosses, there in the entire Halo franchise, there's no bosses. But that's fine. There's plenty of other moments they have replaced with the same emotion, the same feeling as when you beat a boss.
Yeah.
And then I just thought about bosses in the past and what purpose bosses even serve. Like, are they ever really satisfying? And can you get that satisfaction out of other gameplay? And I think you can. And making up this list, I feel like, especially nowadays, the bosses that I enjoy fighting more are not giant set piece bosses, because those don't really exist anymore, but more like either dynamic bosses or bosses that are just satisfying to the story without the gameplay being like a huge thing.
Yeah, I would say when I started going through the bosses, I thought the ones that I guess most impact me, the ones that I most remember, are all story-based bosses.
Yeah.
They're bosses that for a long time have been the foil that now, for the height of whatever, whether it's the chapter that you're playing or the entire length of the game, this is your moment to fight them.
Yeah.
And whether, you get your ass kicked or however, like the gameplay has been the same as it's been for the game. So that doesn't really change. It's really just like, here's the conclusion of this big epic story.
Yeah, it's sort of, the pinnacle of everything. It's like, okay, this whole game usually, even if it's an old side-scrolling game, it's like there's an antagonist. There's something that I'm working towards. Mm-hmm. I'm either trying to save somebody or I'm trying to, stop somebody. But basically it always culminates in a boss battle. There's, mini bosses along the way sometimes, which a lot of times I think can be more fun gameplay-wise. But never as satisfying when you finally get to that final boss.
Yeah.
There's also these moments where when you first encounter a boss, there's kind of that like, oh shit moment, like, especially depending on what kind of boss it is, but it's like, oh no, like I finally have to fight this big thing. Like, what am I going to do? Like that moment of fear, I think is a lot of fun. I mean, I'm mainly talking about games from like 10 and 20 years ago.
Yeah. When I look at my list, none of my 5 are from current or even 360 generation.
Yeah.
And again, I only came up with 5, and there's plenty of bosses that we can talk about.
Yeah, I'm not great with doing like a top.
Yeah.
List,
mine aren't.
So I just scribbled some things down.
Yeah, mine aren't. Some of them are just ones that obviously I remembered, so those are closer to my top. But then others are just ones that, like I said, I thought were a good change of pace.
Okay. Well, do you want to start off with something? You want to throw something out there?
I can. So the first one, I'm going to go in reverse order.
Okay.
So this is the one that took me the longest to think about, as opposed to top of mind. I wrote down Goro from Mortal Kombat. And what got me thinking about him is because Mortal Kombat, and when I started it, Mortal Kombat 2, I believe it was, Super Nintendo? Well, Super Nintendo. Was that 2? Or was that 1? It might have even been 1.
No, 1 came out. I know 1 came out on the Genesis. That's what I had it for.
Maybe it was
and then
1.
Super Nintendo. I think Mortal Kombat 2 was a Super Nintendo exclusive, maybe, or maybe I'm wrong about that. I know they had exclusive.
Goro's been in multiple Mortal Kombats.
The Mortal Kombat 2, the bad guy was
Kano.
Was
Shao Kahn.
Kintaro. Is that correct? He looked like Goro, but he had like tiger stripes.
Okay, then this wasn't Mortal Kombat 2 then.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1. Talking Mortal Kombat 1.
Yeah.
The game was off the wall anyway because you had guys who would freeze powers and you had Scorpion and everyone's familiar with Mortal Kombat.
Right.
But I just remember, and I didn't know Goro was coming first and foremost. So there's just that question mark when you're going up the tier of levels and you're playing in arcade mode, and you beat all these regular Joe schmoes, and then you get to Goro, and Goro is this big guy multiple arms.
4 arms, yeah. And this is before like computer generated graphics too.
Yeah.
They used a stop motion like clay guy to do it. So that was like the other characters are all actually just live action people that they recorded.
Yeah.
So then seeing this like monster in the game
is jarring.
Yeah.
And
he's huge.
And immediately going like I remember thinking like I am not prepared to take on this guy.
I do not have the tools to fight this guy. I don't know what he can do.
Yeah, and then the thing is he was incredibly powerful. I remember just like his slam moves would take away chunks of your health, so you couldn't get close to him.
Right.
But he was incredibly quick. Yep. He was everything that you hated in a fighting game boss because he could do a lot of damage, he could do it quickly, and he could withstand a lot of damage.
That's the thing. If you're like far away, he could do that like teleport big jump to you.
Yep.
If you were close, he would grab you with one of his 4 arms and then beat you with the other 2.
I remember the teleport because the teleport would go above you, and
then
he'd
you didn't know where he would come down. That's the thing. You just basically had to move wherever you were standing.
Yes. And I just remember dying so much at Goro, getting all the way up there, fighting that whole tower, going through Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Johnny Cage and all them,
Sonya Blade
and Sonya, and getting up to that point, and then just like it wasn't even just like the first time, it was like the second time. I'm like, I still don't have a strategy, and then going and like finally getting to the point where you're just like beating Goro is still not something I can do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But it's just like the elation of finally like defeating him and then going like that wasn't even the last guy.
Right. Well, Shang Tsung I think is easier to beat than Goro was.
Yes.
And that's kind of the staple of Mortal Kombat games is the second to last boss is like the boss's bodyguard, so then he's usually harder to beat, which I think is kind of a fun way to do it.
It's much because like that's the thing is you see on the tier that there's somebody above who you're gonna fight, and so you think it's just gonna be another person. You're just like, oh, I'm gonna fight whatever, Liu Kang, something like that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you fight this giant monster, and it took me so long to get past Goro, and then go like, I still haven't beaten the game. I still gotta go up, tick one more, and hope that I don't get my ass handed to me at this guy and have to start pages and pages and pages below.
Right.
So that was a very specific boss.
Right. No, I think that's a good boss. I want to give Shang Tsung an honorable mention, though, just because he's like this old man that's running this tournament, and this whole time you don't think of him as a threat, and especially after beating Goro. And then when you play him, then all of a sudden he has like all these other powers.
Yeah.
Because he's a sorcerer, and he stole these powers from all these other people, so he turns into like an actual good foe. I mean, he's easier to beat than the sub-boss, but still.
Yeah.
It's funny because I had Shere Khan on there, which is the Mortal Kombat 2 boss.
Oh.
So he takes over for Shang Tsung after the first game because they lose or whatever.
Let's do a Mortal Kombat hour.
Anyways, I played a lot of Mortal Kombat, but the reason he was great was, one, he looks super badass.
Yeah.
So he's got like some sort of creature's skull on his face as a mask. He's got like
Shoulder
spikes
pads
on his shoulders and stuff. And so the good thing about him was he's super strong, right? He's got a lot of moves. He's got like this shoulder charge with the spikes. He's got this hammer he pulls out of nowhere and hits you with. And another fun thing is he taunts you all the time. If you stay far away from him or if he like hits you too many times, he'll taunt you. Like he'll say something, he'll point at you, he'll laugh at you.
Yeah.
So that was always fun. And then it also made it super satisfying when you did finally beat him. I think he was probably the only boss out of all the Mortal Kombat that I can think of that where it's harder than the sub-boss, right? He's super difficult, and when you finally do beat him, the animation of beating him is satisfying because he like starts like screaming and all this like green energy stuff comes out of him until he explodes. Yeah, so that was, I was like, yeah! That like moment when you finally get the last hit. So that was my fighting game one. I actually have another fighting game one, but...
Is it... I mean, I can't see your list.
Yeah.
Is it M. Bison?
No.
Okay, good. Because I was gonna say like it's weird. I was always more of a Street Fighter fan than a Mortal Kombat fan.
Yeah.
But when I thought boss like Goro stood out for me more than Bison or Sagat.
Because I feel like Bison is technically a boss, but he's just a normal character that you can always play as. So it's not like. You know, like Goro was a boss in the fact that you never saw who he was until he showed up. He was completely different looking and skill based than any other player you played, and he was never a playable character, at least not until later in the series.
Yeah.
So
it was just, I mean, like, because I always, especially having more recently played a Street Fighter game,
Yeah.
And you have to fight Bison, and that's before. I mean, now like Bison's your sub boss,
Right.
And going like, man, Bison was super powerful, and he had a lot of moves that just got him across the screen really quickly. But it was never like it never felt like the moment. It was never the same as fighting Goro, and maybe it's because I was better at Street Fighter than I was at Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
But it was just like M. Bison being the last guy, like beating him and seeing the credits, and you're like, oh yeah, relief. But Goro and just being like, God damn it, I hate you, Goro.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing.
So my other fighting game one was, I'm not sure how to say the name. I always pronounce it Darrell, but I think it's more like Darrell. I don't know. It's the boss, semi-boss from the Virtual Fighter series.
Okay.
So the Virtual Fighter series was always about like real martial arts moves. Like it wasn't like the Mortal Kombats or like the Street Fighters, things like that. It was about actual moves. There was no superpowers. There was no whatever. Every character had its own specific fighting style instead of moves. Mm-hmm. So I played that a lot. And then once you play through all the game, and like Akira is, you think he's the boss and you think it's over and you think you've beaten it, and then this other character comes out. Have you played it before? Do you know who this character looks like?
I don't think I've ever gotten... I don't think I've played through the story. I played it because it was Virtual Fighter, and it was groundbreaking at the time for being, 3D and having the graphics updated and stuff like that. But I don't think I remember it that well.
Well, after you beat Akira, who's officially, I think, the boss, who's very hard to beat.
Yeah.
He's sort of the Bruce Lee of the game. Every fighting game kind of has a Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Then this character comes out, and it kind of looks like a liquid metal female. And she's got everybody's powers, everybody's moveset and everything like that, and you never know what she's going to do. She's by far the hardest character. Looking it up, turns out there's like a story behind it and everything. It's one of the other characters' mother, and they turn into an android and all this other stuff. But anyways, It was one of those things too where like nowhere on the character screen, no mention of that. It's very like realistic looking people and normal things, and then this like liquid metal robot comes out with all the moves that you've never seen before, and you have to beat her. And usually it's like first to 2 wins, and I think it's best of 3 for her.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because she'll just pull out these freaking moves out of nowhere and just destroy you. Like you'll be doing fine for a while, you'll get a couple punches in, and then she'll just do this long chain combo. But
the old chain combos of fighting games.
Yeah, but that was fun. Later on, too, so in the first game, I believe it was best of 3, and then some of the later iterations, after you beat the like Akira boss or whoever the boss was for that game, you then got to fight her, but you only had one round. You only had one try. If she beat you, it was game over.
And get started all the way back to the beginning.
I mean, technically, because technically you still won the game, but it was kind of like a bonus thing at the end.
Yeah.
But that was another
I would never feel like losing that I beat it. Even if it was just like bonus, I'd just be like,
oh, God damn
I lost.
Right. It doesn't count if I didn't beat her. Yeah.
I didn't get to see the mega happy ending.
Yeah. So I sort of did too there. You got another one?
I've
got that's the thing. I have like 15 of them that I wrote down that aren't in any particular order.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you...
No, like I said, minor. I tried to order mine, but then I got 3 of them, and then I just did like the next 2 that came to mind.
Yeah.
My next one going up the chain is Bowser, but specifically Super Mario World, so the Super Nintendo Mario game. And the reason for that, the reason I put him is because his battle is so much different than the rest of the Koopas that you fight. The rest of the Koopas, you just jump on their head depending on the levels, whatever. Sometimes they're coming out of pipes, sometimes they're just straight on, sometimes, it's a tilty world. Yeah. Whatever it is, the whole thing is jump on their head, push them into lava, you win. But Bowser's in this blimp that you have to throw things up around the blimp to land on his head for it to count as a hit. And it was just, to me, because this isn't, chances are, your first Mario game. Yeah. So Bowser's at the end. So there's this whole, like, you're fighting all these mini bosses, you're fighting all mini Bowsers, all these Koopas, to get to this point where you finally get to face him. And what you think is, like, in all the other ones where you just, like, in the first one, you're just getting the axe to get him to fall through the fire, or the third one where you have to go through the whole ordeal, but then it's again just kind of jumping on him.
Yeah.
And now you get this whole new aspect where you have to pick things up and throw them into the air and hope that he hits them. But instead, he's in this giant blimp that's doing multiple things. It can come down and crush you. It's got a propeller blade, so you can't jump up into it. You can never get higher than it. He throws fireballs. He throws just creatures down. It was just a huge mess. And I just remember it because Super Mario World is first and foremost my favorite Mario game.
You know, it wasn't actually a Mario game, right?
It wasn't?
No, it was another game. They needed to come out with another Mario game, and there was this other game that wasn't so great, so they literally just bought it and put Mario all over it. That's why the game mechanics are kind of different. That's why it doesn't look like Mario 1 at all.
No.
It's got sort of a more cartoony look, and it's like the guys that are flying that throw like the hammers at you and stuff, like that wasn't in the first game.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Whatever game that used to be, kudos, because
right.
That's my favorite one of any of the Mario games.
Yeah, I think I have played that one the most by far.
Yeah, I played that one, and then probably my second favorite is Mario 64.
Well, yeah, for different reasons, but yeah.
But to me, it was just, and then you finally beat him, and then it's that elation of you essentially just beat a really long game because with all the levels, all the multiple paths for the levels, all the head bosses. It's a game. It was the first Super Nintendo game for sure that I had, and the fact that it's so long that there's save points that it's just like, okay, you got this far, you have to save it, as opposed to passwords, or having to beat things in one sitting. So to know that this is the culmination of multiple days of work, then it's just like, oh my god, I finally did it.
Yeah.
So that is my choice.
Well, that reminds me of like the way to do boss battles well and how to do them poorly, I think. So like the first time you ever encounter Bowser in a Super Mario game, the first one, you basically just jump over him and make him fall through the bridge, right?
Yes.
Which is a huge cop-out. Like, it's fine because it's going to be a boss later on and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that always just frustrates me. Like, I mentioned to you before about, like, Guacamelee, is you keep seeing the bosses and you keep encountering them, like, every level or so. You keep coming up to them, and then they just talk to you and then just leave. Like, that's super frustrating. That's not a good way to build tension.
No.
That just builds frustration and be like, okay, I know I can't fight them yet. I'm not ready. But don't just be like, oh, here they are. Like, and then they just leave without fighting. That's super annoying.
Yeah.
Like, and then the way Super Mario 2 did it at the end with him, like the thing, you can't just go hand to hand with Bowser. He's going to beat you. He should be able to beat you.
Yes.
Like, you're little, you don't have that much skill set. You basically can just run and jump and, pick up things.
Yeah.
So that's why, in like a really interesting way, I think a good dynamic where it makes sense gameplay-wise and story-wise, and it's still satisfying when you beat him.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, like, that to me, obviously, again, having played, all the normal Nintendo ones and then going to this one, just seeing it's just like, oh shit, like, this is not like any of the other bosses.
Right.
There was no boss that kind of sets you up for this, nor did he copy earlier, bosses that you fought through the game. You're like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do here. It's just like, first time you go in, I remember not even knowing how to hit him because really... You have to throw it so high, and you can't avoid, because he's in this giant bowl, essentially. If you hit the bowl at all, it doesn't do any damage. You have to actually hit him on the head. So you sit there, and he's just constantly kicking monsters up at you, and shooting at you, and trying to fall on you.
Yeah.
That you're throwing them, because you're like, okay, clearly I have to do something with them. But if you hit the propeller blade, they just come back towards you. Like, there's just no...
Yeah, that was always a fun aspect of playing bosses for the first time back in the day, is, like, you really did have to figure out, how am I supposed to damage this guy?
Yeah.
Because it was so different than anything else you experienced. Half the fun was trial and error.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what to do. Now I feel like, I don't know if it's just because I've played so many games, or because video games have sort of become more cliche, more, like, I don't know, the same. But I bet we could probably name a couple... ways boss battles come out, right?
Yeah.
So there's like basically you shoot the weak points. So there's like glowing things or like whatever.
They're always glowing.
There's always glowing. There's you have to throw something at the boss. Either you have to throw something back at the boss, or there's something around the level that you throw at the boss.
Yeah.
Or there's like environmental damage. You have to make something happen. Like either you make them crash into a wall, or you like make electricity hit them, or something like that.
Yeah, and then you can damage them.
or there's like the quick time event button presses, like where you avoid damage for a while and then you have a moment where you can go and press a lot of buttons. And I feel like that's probably every boss battle I can think of.
Oh yeah, in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I didn't put this on my list, but what you made me think of with like the weak points and a place that I thought did really good bosses. Well, the whole game was bosses. Is Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2, and each boss was unique in the aspect of like, how the hell do I get to that weak point? Because you could see it, or you had a vague idea where it was. But what I thought the cop-out was, in that, because I loved that game. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Is once, like, all the weak points are on the body, and then once you get that first foothold,
it's over.
It's over, because it's just like, the whole thing is to get on top of these monsters. And then, they're huge, they're hulking, they try and kill you, but then you're just like, oh, I'm on your back, and now I got it.
Right. It's the same thing. I don't know if you played like God of War.
Yeah.
A lot of those bosses are the same. Like, they're huge epic set pieces, but once you do the first step, it's basically you just press buttons and you do it. There's no actual skill involved, which is kind of, it's satisfying visually when it happens. Like, oh, that was fun, that was cool, but you don't feel like you ever actually did anything.
Yeah.
So... whose turn is it?
You have more, so you should probably go.
So when I was talking about how in Guacamelee it was annoying that bosses showed up and then you didn't do it, I will say though, I think it is fun when you do see the boss throughout the game, so then it's like a build up. Not just physically have a conversation with them and then they leave, which is what Guacamelee does. But I thought Gears of War did a really good job of sort of teasing a boss before it would happen.
Yeah.
Like you would see like remnants of like corpses or stuff, or you'd see them in the distance, or they would destroy a city, but you weren't there. You couldn't actually do anything about it. So then when you finally fought it, it was satisfying. The one boss that I did enjoy was the Brumac, which... They exist in the cutscenes of the first Gears, but they were playable. Like, you could fight them as a boss in the PC version, so they had more levels in the PC version. And so, as you're playing through that extra levels, it's like off in the distance, destroying cities, going things, or like you can't fight it, so you have to hide while it walks past you. So then when you finally get to fight it in this big epic arena sort of thing, it was very satisfying. Like, you have to like shoot out the guns in its hands and they blow up, then you got to kill the pilot, then you got to like do all this stuff. And like, you're very weak, it's very strong, and there's multiple steps to fighting it. So it was satisfying once it was over. But the one that I actually did put on my list was General Ram. I don't know if you played all the way through Gears of War 1.
I did not.
You haven't?
No.
Okay. He's the last boss of it. Spoiler alert. Did you play through like the first level or two?
Yeah, I played. I'd say
he's
halfway.
like the big locust, and he's got like a black on. He's like much bigger.
Okay.
He kills like your squad leader. I don't know if you saw that part.
It was a long time ago that I played. Okay. I mean, I played like halfway through, so I probably saw it. But
anyways, he's the big bad boss at the end. He has krill, which are these like flying bat things, these giant, like they're little pterodactyl sort of things, and they can only go in darkness. They can't go in light. But anyways, there's krill throughout the game. Like if you go into darkness, some points they'll get there and rip you apart.
Yeah.
But he has a shield made out of them, so they fly around him in a swarm to protect him. So to get them off, you have to create some sort of explosion. So either you have to shoot like there's I forgot what it's called. It's like a torque bow, and it shoots like flame arrows at him, basically. That's one of the ways you can do it with her grenades. So you have to get rid of the shield, but you also have to stay in the light. There's light and dark within where you're fighting. Once the shield goes out, then they actually come at you. So you have to shoot him while that's happening. Also, he's carrying around a turret the entire time that he can just rip you apart in like 2 or 3 hits. Nice. So it's a very, very hard fight. Plus, there's other things going on at the time. And you're on a speeding train with a bomb on it. And so there's a time...
let's just add things to it.
There's like crazy amount of stuff happening. And there's a time limit on it because of you're on a train with a bomb on it. So both the train and the bomb are... Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. It's very satisfying. And beating that on like the hardest difficulty level was very satisfying when we finally did it. And it's like you have to sort of like have one guy with the torque bow, another guy with the sniper. And when it gets down, you got to and then shoot him a couple times. But if you run out of grenades or you run out of torque bow, you're screwed because you can't get rid of a shield. So there's like all these things, and it's a very hard boss. Like the bosses throughout it, I think the entire game did a good job of setting up bosses. Not all of them were satisfying once you actually beat them, but that one was.
Yeah.
And that's the thing they set up for like the first or second cutscene. He was there doing stuff.
I was gonna piggyback off you started you were talking about boss setups.
Yeah.
So you talked about like how Guacamelee teases you, and then you just never get to set it up, and then the Brumac teases you, but then it's actually a good payoff.
Yeah.
Even though I love this game, what that made me think of is Mass Effect 1 is Saren is obviously from the first 10 minutes of the game, that this is going to be a boss.
Yeah.
Like there's
I don't know why the people in the console don't realize that. He's bad.
But so like there's teaser, just like you're always trying to be like he seems one step ahead of you, and then you finally get to have the fight, the end of the game, the fight. And I was really let down by how I just feel like that boss battle went, because I feel like it was. And I know there's multiple. I don't know if you're gonna.
Should we do a spoiler?
No.
Okay.
I'm not gonna spoil. I'm just saying like. The boss itself, it seems like took an insane amount of time to kill, which I'm fine with, but in a game
that's not combat heavy.
It just was awkward. It requires a lot of essentially pausing to pull up your
to switch between your inventory stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like there's a lot of times where you're just like, okay, I'm fully recharged. Pause. I need to do this move and this move. And then hit him, and then shoot him a couple times, and hide behind a rock. It just, for a game that wasn't combat heavy, to essentially have this epic boss fight, which I'm fine with, just kind of seemed.
But it's also weird too, because you're basically in just one open area. There's no cover. There's no anything that was sort of like the combat mechanics at the time. It's fine to change up the gameplay, like we've talked about, and that can be fun and interesting. But it felt like that was a boss battle from a different game.
Yeah, because it is. You are dropped into this essentially rectangular arena where there's maybe like two pieces of rubble in the middle to hide behind.
Yeah.
And then Saren is just...
And he can like walk on walls and stuff, so it doesn't matter.
He's just flying all over the place, so you're just like, okay, I'm literally in an open that I have to kill when I have my 3 squad mates, and they keep dying, or 2 squad mates, because they're always useless. And so it's just this really long, tedious fight, which normally those make me feel even more elation when I finish.
Yeah.
But for Mass Effect, every time I play it, I'm just like,
right.
God damn it.
It didn't take a long time because it was necessarily hard. It took a long time because the mechanics weren't correct. And that's, I understand. Yeah. That's super frustrating. Did you think there's like a false ending to that fight? Did you think that was the end of it?
No. I had a feeling it wasn't.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Like if there's some dialogue choices, yeah.
I will say I didn't find those because obviously I played through it multiple times.
Yeah.
And the first time, like, I think it wasn't unlocked, that dialogue choice, because I didn't have enough
skills. Points. Yeah.
So we're being really vague on purpose.
I know, that's the thing. I mean, it's hard to talk about bosses without spoiling games.
But like I didn't have that option, and then I ended up just fighting him regularly.
So then it wasn't.
So then I knew that was a thing, and then I read online that they're just like, oh, if you do this, you don't have to fight him.
But it's a lie.
You
always have to fight him. Yeah.
And so I was upset at the internet, like you normally do, because I did it when I played the game the second time. I'm just like, I don't want to do this fight again. They tell me to say this one line, and then I don't have to fight him. And then you're just like, oh, God damn it.
Right.
God damn you, internet. You lied to me.
Once again, it's hard not to talk about this without having spoilers, so I don't know.
What game?
Dead Space 1. It's not a big spoiler. You fight a boss at the end of it. I mean, it's a combination of everything you've been doing. It's not like a character shows up and that character is the bad guy.
I think you're fine.
So anyway, there's a hive mind that you beat at the end of Dead Space 1. So there's this long level at the end of it, which is very fun and very satisfying. There is this sort of lead up and stuff, and then this big, huge, giant creature comes out, and you have to fight it. It's the typical like shoot weak point sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it is fun because one, massive scale of it, and you're really small, and even some of the smaller creatures you've been fighting this whole time have been hard to beat. It's got these big tentacles that one sort of contains you into the space, but also can like whip at you and grab your leg and pull you in, and then it does a little like quick time event where you have to do things.
Sure.
Plus it's shooting other enemies at you. It shoots little pods, and then like those enemies come out, and you have to deal with them. So that's fun. And then yeah, like you shoot its weak points, then it gets mad, and then other things happen, and there's like quick time events within it, but not just quick time events, but like sometimes it'll grab your leg and pull you into its mouth, and you have to shoot like things in its neck for it to let you go. Yep. Things like that. They're not exactly quick time events, and they're not exactly scripted, but they're like sort of dynamic, fun things that you can do. And then when you finally beat it, it is very satisfying
to watch the giant thing crumble.
Yeah.
I mean, the weak point, the technique of shoot the weak points doesn't always have to be so overly used where it's kind of annoying where things are glowing orange because then you're just like, oh, I shot the leg enough so the leg exploded, now I gotta shoot the next leg.
Yeah.
There's ways they can go about it where it's like, yeah, you have to hit these spots, but like they kind of make sense.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm not going to explain it well, and without seeing it, it's kind of hard to tell. But it's like, yeah, it has like these glowing sort of polyp things, and then when you shoot them, when you shoot enough, then something else opens up.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So it's like it's kind of like a step by step.
Yeah, and that sounds.
And it's
fine.
not like, oh, I'm a big guy, but I have a weak point on like one of my knees, which some games are like that. It's like this is a big, huge monster made up of other weird things. So,
but that's what I'm talking about. Is when they have these giant, huge monsters, and their weak point is something that's just like this would never be a weak point.
Right.
You're just like, oh, this guy's weak point is his left thigh and his right elbow and his butt. You know, and you're just like
Bloodstorm.
Yeah. So you're just like, oh, whatever side I'm on, I have something to shoot because the game doesn't want you to actually have to think about it.
Yeah.
And then you just cycle between the hit points, and then you watch his health like catapult down as opposed to just like tick away.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, like the Dead Space one sounds like it's actually, you know, well thought out.
Yeah, and like I said, on paper it might sound like some other boss fights, but it does kind of come together well, and the gameplay's fun.
Yeah,
and it felt satisfying when it was over, and it was literally one of the first things that I thought of when we were thinking about bosses. So
that's good.
That should mean something.
Yeah, I mean, if that means it obviously left a mark on you. So my next one, this is a doozy. This is this is a deep cut for all the listeners.
Yeah,
it's a two-parter. I only wrote down one, but I will explain. It's either the Sword Master from Monkey Island 1 or Captain Rene Rottingham from Curse of Monkey Island, also known as Monkey Island 3.
I thought I saw somewhere, like I think IGN did a thing about best and worst bosses. And
did they make the worst?
He was the worst.
Nice.
The second one you said, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I liked him.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's on my boss list. And here I will, for people who are unfamiliar with Monkey Island, it's an adventure game. It's inventory management, point and click, dialogue, whatever. So you wouldn't think that there's a lot of bosses. But in the first and third game of the series, there's this thing called insult sword fighting. What it is you get a sword for the first time, or in the third one you get a ship. What you do is, like, as opposed to the sword just being used to stab people, the pirates have a code. The sword, or your mind is, you know, stronger than the sword. So what you have to do to win sword fights is you have to insult the pirate that you're fighting, and then if you insult them, you kind of win that duel, and if they come back, then they win it, and it's like best of three. So, like, for examples, without going into it too much, is like, you'll get in, like, you start off and you have no insults. And to learn the insults, you actually have to be insulted. So you're going to start off and you just lose a shitload to learn them. And then so you finally kind of learn, you have to learn the insult and then you have to learn the comeback. So there's 2 sections to each one. So obviously if they insult you, you use the comeback. And when it's your turn, you insult them and hope that they don't have the comeback.
Yeah.
Anyway, you go through this huge process. You learn all these things and you memorize them. You're like, I know if they use this insult, it's this comeback. I know if I use this one, it's that one. And then you get to fight these bosses. In the first game, you fight the Sword Master, which is the same thing as the third one. But what it is you go in, and you still have all your comebacks, but they do the insulting, but it's all insults you've never heard before. And you can't learn them, so you can't test them out. And you just have to... You have to literally use your mind to pick what comeback would fit this situation.
You gotta use your mind for this game?
Yeah. So, like, I guess the ones... Usually your comebacks have to rhyme or they have to be essentially...
On point with what they're saying, yeah.
So it's like, you know... no, you fight like a dairy farmer.
Okay.
And then the comeback is how appropriate you fight like a cow. So it's like, even though it doesn't rhyme, it makes sense. And there's one just like, every enemy I've met, I've annihilated. And then your comeback is like, with your breath, I'm sure they all suffocated. So, we're all having laughs.
Yeah.
So then you get these insults, and then, they'll kind of be along the same line, but they're completely different wording. And then you have to go through all your comebacks and just be like, oh, crap, which one is this? And again, this is before the internet.
Yeah.
And you can't, even if you fail, you can't then take those insults to one of the regular pirates, because then they immediately go like, that's unfair, you can't use those insults.
Yeah.
And then they immediately forfeit, and they're like, you fought the Swordmaster, like, we don't want anything to do with you. So then you just have to like keep trying, and you just have to kind of like go like, oh, okay, this one kind of matches. So to me, the elation of being a little kid and figuring this out, and it not being like a Twitch response, or just being like, you just literally had to use your brain and just be like, oh, I did it. I rhymed fumigated with suffocated, or whatever the hell it was. And then seeing them be defeated, and then you get to continue on the story. So that was a really long explanation.
No, I thought it was good. And it's certainly different than most boss battles.
And that's the thing, is I think the reason it stood out for me is because like you spent all this time getting this whole wealth of knowledge of your insults and comebacks, and you're like, oh, I'm ready to take on the boss. Yeah. And then you go, because you had all those memorized, you're matching, and then you go and fight, and you get completely new things, and you're just like, shit. The Swordmasters isn't saying you fight like a dairy farmer. Yeah. He's saying, like,
all these other things.
I'm going to milk your mother.
Yeah.
And then you have
you're
to
like, oh, God.
Oh, my God, you sick bastard. And then you have to somehow say, like, how appropriate you fight like a cow. And somehow, that's obviously a terrible example, but then you have to find something that matches what they're actually saying. And
the fact that it wasn't all laid out for you, that you had to actually not just spit back the information they gave you with all these insults, you had to actually figure out what to do. Like they try to like teach you a skill, as stupid as it is. Yeah. But then you actually had to it was like a test of your knowledge, basically. They're like, okay, you have to prove that you actually learned what we taught you, rather than just hitting X a million times.
Yeah, as opposed to just matching. Yeah. You actually had to know, like, okay, this answer always rhymes, so you have to try and rhyme it with him, or you have to try and understand what fumigation means, so like that. And for when you're, especially like now, you could play and they're probably real simple to figure out, but like being a little kid and just being like, I don't know what half these fucking words mean. Yep. And then just being like, I did it. I somehow did it without any help.
Nice. And that reminded me of, I have a couple old school bosses on here. Okay. I won't go into too in depth. Well, Mike Tyson from Punch Out.
Impossible.
Impossible. He was one of those bosses.
That was a joke boss.
Exactly. It was borderline broken. It was before my frustration turned into obsession sort of thing. I did not even attempt to fight him because I thought it was borderline broken. So I was just like, okay, I'd get here, one punch, you can't do anything. 2 years ago at Gen Con, there was a room that was dedicated to like video games and stuff, and on the projection board, it was just trying to beat Mike Tyson. Yeah. And so there was like a long line of people, and you get to try for like 10 or 15 minutes, and you have to switch, and nobody could do it the entire time. And there was like people that like knew how to do it and still couldn't do it because there's like a trick to it. Yeah. But yeah, he was one of those bosses that obviously everybody remembers. He was the end of this fighting game, and he could kill you in one punch. You couldn't really get to him. He was giant, and he would move around really funny, and he would just have to punch you once, and you'd be dead.
Yeah, I mean, because that, for everyone who didn't play Punch-Out, that game was all just about learning patterns, and then memorizing when to dodge and then when to punch. And for most people, it's like, you dodge their big hit, and then you either hit them in the stomach or the face, and then they're dazed, and then you can get a bunch of punches in and kind of work down their health. Tyson, and there, a lot of them would have cues. Yeah. This one guy, I mean, like the third fight, like his eyebrows would move a lot. Yeah. And then that knew that he was going to go into his move, and so once you see the eyebrows, then you kind of get into blocking and dodging position, and then you're fine. Tyson, because it was the last battle, he had no cues, right. At least what I remember. It was just like, all of a sudden, he's just moving his feet. There's
no pattern,
and then just boom, right. He just goes for a punch, and if you get hit once, he immediately opens up a combo on you. Yeah. Like, one hit is a death sentence. Even if it might not knock you down, like, right. It just leaves you open for every hit. And then, I remember the best I ever did is I dodged, like, his first two punches and got, like, 2 hits to his side. Yep. So I took down maybe an eighth of his hits
Right.
before I lost like all 3 guys. I'm just like, oh, okay.
Another is Shredder from Turtles in Time. Anytime you get to the end of a Ninja Turtles game, especially an arcade game, it's very satisfying because they are quite difficult and long.
Yep.
And the cool thing about him was not only was it Shredder, but it's like, okay, he could levitate. There was like the Statue of Liberty behind you, and he had all these crazy attacks that you hadn't seen before. So that was kind of fun. It's just really satisfying when you finally beat him, just because it was so hard and it was the end of a long journey.
Yeah, Turtles in Time was a long game too.
Yeah.
It was also a great game.
It's a great game.
Not to, again, allude to something that's going to happen a year from now, but if we do the video game marathon theme days, mine is going to be like, that game is on my list of like top 24 multiplayer games of all time.
Mine too. Another one, I mean, I have a couple on here, but I don't know, I'm not going to say it. There's one from like Donkey Kong 64. There was the armadillo. I don't know if you remember that. He had
Giant
like,
armadillo?
Yeah, it's like an armadillo, and he had like 2 cannons on his back and stuff, and he could like roll around. I don't know. I that was one I could remember from that era, so I wrote it down. And then Phantom Ganon from Ocarina of Time. Zelda Ocarina of Time.
I'm trying to remember him now.
So, I mean, he's always like the boss of the things, but he was on this giant flying horse. It was like a purple and black horse. He had like a trident. And the first stage, well, first of all, the level leading up to him was really cool. It was like a sort of pyramid sort of thing. And then it started off with a room with a bunch of paintings of him, and you wouldn't know which one he was in or which one he was coming out of. And you would have to, like, one of them would look different, and then you would have to shoot it with a flaming arrow. And if you didn't, he would like fly out and hit you with the trident.
Yeah, okay.
And then after that, he comes off of his horse, and then like he changes into something else. It was just satisfying. There's like multiple stages to it, and it was just fun. I remember it. Ocarina of Time is a great game.
I was gonna say, like, for the most part, I can't say I've played a lot of the new Zeldas because obviously I just haven't had the system. But I always felt that Zelda did their Ganon boss very well throughout the games.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember the Super Nintendo one. I can remember, Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time were great. Even, the very first one, which everyone just, normal Nintendo.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just a series that, granted, it's gone through its stumbles
ups and downs,
of just being like, oh, okay, like, I know in the second world I'm going to get bombs, in the third world I'm going to get a boomerang. Like, it's very, like, cookie cutter, like, you know what's going to happen. I always felt that their last hurrah was always successful.
Yeah. No, they always did boss battles well, I think.
Yeah.
Like, even the sub-bosses, like, there's some, like, giant spiders and stuff you fight, and those are fun and satisfying.
I remember, talking about Ocarina of Time, the first one I always think of is the very first one in Deku Forest.
Yeah.
Where it's just the eyeball spider.
Right.
And all you have is, your bamboo stick and a slingshot with some rocks. And having to put those together. Obviously, it's pretty easy to figure out. Like
how do you combine them? Yeah.
But just like, those bosses were always... And you knew because, like, you'd get a weapon in that boss. That dungeon.
Yeah.
So you knew, like, okay, this dungeon I got bombs. I'm gonna need bombs for the boss. And that always rang true, but it was just like how they worked it in was very entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That is most of mine. I have a couple more.
I got 2 more.
Okay, go for it then.
Let me these are the 2 that first came to mind for me. Actually, there was 3.
These are your top couple.
These are 2 of my top 3. The third one I didn't even write down, and I'll explain why. Here's my thing. When I think about bosses, my favorite genre being RPGs are always the story based. Where all this culmination of these long ass games. So maybe these bosses aren't different or even worth mentioning.
I got a couple of those, so don't worry.
But like the one that I have, I'll go 2 and then you can talk, and then I'll go 1. But just so, like, we lay on the table, like, I could have filled my entire list with just RPG bosses.
Yeah.
Because, you play through an 80-hour story or 20-hour, or however long it's going to be, and you fight this big boss, and all the skills that you've learned, and all the hit points you've gained, and all the, the stat tracking that you do. Now here's where you get to use it. And the bosses are usually always fair but hard. Like, I never... got to a head boss from an RPG and just felt like, shit, I'm super underpowered. It's always like, it's doable. I just got to be better. I have to be quicker. So the more recent one, Final Fantasy X, before the last head boss, you actually fight Sin. Which, did you ever play 10?
No.
Okay. The without spoiling anything, because I know you're going to go back and play it after I've said something, is you play as a character who essentially gets teleported to this world that he knows nothing about. It's a little bit more, mythical, I guess, and there's this big monster that all the townsfolk just call Sin, and there's
S-I-N?
S-I-N. Yeah. And there's two beliefs, and there's one that's, it's this religious being that essentially is, obviously it's destroying you if you're not following the religious sect, and there's another belief that just thinks, it's this giant monster and it's out for destruction, whatever you want to believe. There's cutscenes, and it's always this looming thing of just like wars where like Sin's approaching and they shoot it with cannons and nothing dents it. So you play this huge game. Final Fantasy X is a big game, and the story I won't spoil it because I guess people might play it, but like the story points out that Sin isn't what people think it is. So your character, and all these people that are in your party are going to fight this essentially mythical beast, and like right before the lead up, there's a song that's in the game that essentially like you're in a aircraft, and like every townsperson is singing the song so that it essentially you can hear it from your aircraft, and just it's this really moving moment where like the whole world is together with you to fight this one thing that's all causing them problems. It's whether you believe that's religious or you believe it's not, like everyone's coming together. It's just this real, I guess, heavy moment that peaks at the game, and then you get to fight this thing that's just been this omnipotent destroyer of worlds. And it's a long fight, and you're swapping out a lot of characters just to use all their powers and stuff like that, and then you finally beat it, and of course it's not the end, and then you go to the last boss, which, it is what it is, but like that just moment of fighting that boss where you're just like, holy shit, I have to fight the unfightable.
Right.
And then, it's great. I like it.
Yeah. Well, so I sort of have a list of like, I don't know how to do this. So I have other ones that aren't straight up bosses. Mm-hmm. I put them under like dynamic. They're more dynamic.
Okay.
So that would be like the big daddies in BioShock. Yeah, so they're not bosses. They're not a boss. Well, the thing is like they're not like a boss where you go through a level and then you have to kill this big daddy to move on. It's like, okay, they exist in the world, and there's so many different ways you can kill them or approach them, or you can completely avoid them if you want to. So I thought that was cool, and just the way that I would like set up a boss battle. Like I had already decided, okay, I'm gonna fight this guy before he knew we were gonna fight. So I'd like lay like proximity mines, or I'd put up like tripwires or things like that, and then I would like aggro him so he'd come after me. I don't know. I think that's kind of where games have sort of gone more to, and I think I like that now.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying that it's better than the old traditional boss fight set pieces, but I like that. And another thing I put in that category is the scarabs from Halo 3.
Okay.
The giant scarab walker things. It's another thing where it's very dynamic. There's like...
That's also, I'd say that's a boss.
Yeah. But it's not like...
No, yeah, you don't go to a level to fight this and then the level ends.
Right. There's there's levels where there's like 2 or 3 of them, and you know, but there's different ways to destroy them. You can like be in a large vehicle and you can like shoot out its legs, or you can board it and go blow it up from inside. But it's fun because there's a couple different stages to it, like, you know, like if you shoot out its legs or you get out the back, or once you go inside of it too, it's filled with enemies and you have to fight through the enemies, and then you have to get to the core and blow up the core. Yep. And then it's always fun to like run and like, you know, action movie jump out as it does this giant, huge blue plasma explosion behind you. So I thought that was
I will say
good alternative.
I really
sort of
did
to
like fighting the scarabs in Halo 3.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I never hated Halo 3, but I thought that was a good. I really liked. I mean, especially like even when it was frustrating, like trying to figure out how to jump on them, and you're just like, God damn it! Like it's not getting close enough. It's not going on one knee or whatever it's supposed to do. It's just like, even then, it was still like this. You know, you have a bunch of essentially other Marines. That are all computer controlled. That are like, it makes it seem more epic than it eventually is, because it's just a normal guy, quote unquote. Like, I mean, like it's not a boss.
Yeah, and like that's the cool thing too, is it had its own AI and everything. It wasn't the same thing every time. It wasn't scripted. You didn't know if it goes over here, it's gonna shoot this, and then I have to hide. And so
What else you got?
Well,
because I only got one more written down.
Okay, and then I mean we can sort of, if you want to talk about levels a little bit. Because I just wanted to, like the end of Halo, I wanted to talk about too, the last level here. But another thing that I had down that was, well, okay.
You'll get it.
I have multiple things. I'm just going to say that without any preface. I'm just going to say them. Okay. So I wanted to give sort of an honorable mention to the Batman series, because they have a lot of bosses in them, obviously, because all the villains and stuff. So Arkham Asylum had basically a lot of the bosses were the same. There was something going on in this story that made a lot of sense of why the bosses were similar. Some people like it, some people hated it. But the Poison Ivy fight was definitely different, because for a long time you're not actually fighting her. Like she hides somewhere and she has like her minions come out, and then you have to like set up traps to, after you kill all of them, to explode things, and then there's like poisonous gas involved. So that's fun. I liked all of, I think it was because it came from the wealth of Batman villains. And so you already had all this backstory, all this feeling and emotion. So when you saw one of them for the first time, you're like, yeah, I get to fight this thing. So I just wanted to give just a little note. I like the way they have bosses. Not all of them are great, but it's just fun the way they do. Okay, so the one I have that's not really a boss, but it kind of is set up that way is it's not really a spoiler, but Sander Cohen from Sander Cohen from the original BioShock. So you haven't gotten that far, right? Because you only played a little bit. So it's not exactly a spoiler, but about halfway through the game, you have to do a bunch of things for him. He's kind of tormenting you, and you kind of have to go through objectives because you're trying to get somewhere that he's hiding behind. He's locked himself in this place, and you need to get there. So he's like really messed up and weird, and like you have to do things for him, and he's already like messed with other people. And so after you do all that, it's definitely the best probably level in the game, or even in the series. Then you get to where he is, and you get to make the decision of whether or not you kill him. So you can kill him, or you can not. And he's just a normal guy. He doesn't have weapons or anything, so you can just shoot him in the head. You can do whatever you want. But that was always a very satisfying moment when you finally get to him as a person. So even though it's not technically a boss, there's no different mechanics in the game style, and he doesn't like have all this power or anything. It was completely a story-driven boss. It's why I said it was one of my favorites.
Well, I mean, you do essentially it meets the boss criteria. Where it's you go through this, level or story or chapter or whatever it is, then at the very end, you meet the antagonist. And then I mean, in this one, it kind of flips the script where it's like, as opposed to this big epic fight that you've kind of been expecting, it's just like, here's this person, do what you will. Do you want to kill him? Are you just like, I'm not going to kill this defenseless man and walk away? Like, it gives you that choice, but still, it meets the boss where it's like, here you go, here's your antagonist. It'd be the same thing if, you get through Street Fighter and like M. Bison, or Mortal Kombat, like let's say the old man who sets the whole thing up is literally just an old man. And you can just walk up to him and just
punch him in the face.
Do whatever finishing moves you want to him, and he's just like, I'm just an old man. It's like it's the same thing where it's just like, you fought all the way to get to this point. Here's your boss. If you want to be a dick and kill him, kill him.
That reminded me of. Do you remember the beating one of the prophets in Halo 2? So Halo 2 introduced a couple of bosses, and they're not like traditional boss fights, but he was one of these guys that are ruling the Covenant. There's 3 of them. Basically, they're these kind of weak alien things that fly around in these little hover things. So basically, after you go through all the steps to get to him finally, multiple levels, he's got a bunch of guards protecting him that are very strong and everything. Then once you get to him, it's just like this old weak man in a little pod, and you get to jump on the pod. There's a new mechanic they added for Halo 2 where you could board enemy vehicles, and so they use that. So you basically jump on his pod, and you're just punching him in the face till he dies, and the whole time he's like, no, stop, please don't. Yeah. And all he can do is, to defend himself, is just sort of fly his little guy around and bounce off of things while you're punching him to death. So that's
depressing.
Yeah, it's fun and satisfying. Well, he's a really bad guy.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's like still depressing.
Yeah, it's just
that like Master Chief isn't just like, I'm just gonna haul you into court. He's just like, no, I'm gonna kill you by punching you.
Kill you,
and I'm just gonna shoot you.
Right. It's so great that you just slowly punch him to death as you're riding around in this little hover car.
Very nice.
I mean, that's more or less it. If you just wanted to talk about.
Oh, I got my last one.
Yeah.
And this one, again, RPG setup. I already did that one.
Uh-huh.
From Final Fantasy VI or for the US, Final Fantasy III. I always got to specify that.
Yeah.
The last boss, I believe it's Kefka or Kefka. It's Kefka.
Once again, when they didn't have dialogue and stuff, you never heard these names out loud, so you didn't know what to say.
This is all text-based. But anyway, throughout the whole game, again, this is a character like is the boss, whatever. But it just seems that, like this stupid politician who's essentially trying to take over the world, and that's what he is. In Final Fantasy VI, you get a huge cast of characters. Like, I want to say it might be the biggest in any of the Final Fantasies. Huge cast of characters, and you pick your party. Most of the time the party's split up, and you do different missions with each one. But then finally it all comes together, and you fight this final boss where you're just like, what's this guy really got? So you pick your party. And like any of the Final Fantasies, you pick whoever you think is going to be strongest or whatever. But this boss essentially becomes, I don't want to say heavenly because that sounds weird.
Yeah.
But it's essentially like...
Talking about Bayonetta?
Yeah, I'm talking about Bayonetta. You fight... It's hard to describe unless you actually see it. But what it is essentially this huge boss who spans from... Like, he turns into something else where he turns into like this big amorphous blob that ascends to the heavens. But you have to fight a section of them at a time.
Like Jack and the Beanstalk.
The old turn-based games, for those who are unfamiliar or new, is just like, you couldn't see the whole boss on the screen. Yeah. So you would literally fight the bottom section, and the bottom section...
oh my god, there's another one.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another one.
And then you'd destroy him, and then your characters would ascend, and you'd fight the middle section, and then ascend the head. It's this great, like, orchestral music in the back that's very church-like, because you're fighting like in a church. He's essentially all-powerful, like, part of his amorphous blob, like, takes the shape of, like, angels and devils. Very great, but what I think really resonates with this is, like, any of the Final Fantasy games, if your character dies, you just, cast Revive, or you bring him to a town, or whatever, there's nothing. This game, this battle, characters are permadeath.
Oh, wow.
So you have this huge cast of characters, and if they all survive, great, the ending talks about every character that survives. But if your character dies during this final battle, that's it. They're dead. You can't use them anymore. You immediately sub them out for someone else, and then the ending just
changes.
They're just dead.
Yeah.
So it's this huge thing where you just like, you fight this huge battle. It's 3 battles all in a row. There's no save points in between them. So you have to go through this whole thing, and then what your initial instinct is to do is maybe to put all your best characters up front, but those are probably your favorite characters, and then the sadness when, like, he lands a lucky hit and he kills a character, and then you're just like, the character's dead. Like, I didn't protect them, and now I have to substitute that one for maybe a weaker one that you didn't have set up.
Does the game indicate that it's a permadeath before you get into the fight? Or did he die and then you're like, oh, he's dead forever?
Kind of. So, like, before you start the fight, because, again, you have this huge cast of characters, like 15 characters long, it takes you to a list, and it says, put the characters in order of you want them to show up. The first 4 being your starting 4. So then you list them all. It doesn't tell you that if a character dies, they're done forever. It just tells you, like, a character will be replaced if it can no longer continue the fight.
Yeah.
And so, like, you have, like, oh, I'm probably never going to use number 10.
Yeah.
But if essentially, so many characters die that those just keep popping in, and then, obviously, you have the weaker ones at the bottom because you're like, I hope this doesn't come to this, and then they die. But to me, it was just, again, it's still a turn-based game. It doesn't change the gameplay, but the whole, like, you play through this whole game and there's no permadeath, and then they just turn it on for this last final boss was like, oh, holy shit, okay. Yeah. You know, I just played 80 hours with these characters, and now to just kind of watch them get picked off and not be able to be revived. Depressing.
Yep. I'm really surprised that you didn't have Chrono Trigger on there anywhere.
I thought about it. Chrono Trigger, though...
Well, Lavos isn't...
Lavos is great, and I was going to put him on there, but then, again, I was filling up with...
Too many RPG things.
Too many RPGs. Yeah. I could have done him. The other one I was thinking was, obviously, Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, because then you get payback for him, you know, doing what he does in the game.
Yeah.
Don't want to spoil that game. That's still new.
All right.
But yeah, I could have filled the whole thing up. I could have done Sephiroth, I could have done Lavos. But I was just like, Lavos isn't as great as I think my other two RPG ones are. So that's what I have for bosses.
But you also wrote down some other things, which is like, I don't know if we would call them boss levels or final levels or epic levels.
So when you told me to write down bosses, you sent me a text message.
Textual
message. I believe it is. Yep. It got me to thinking about not only my favorite bosses, but some of my favorite levels or segments, because some of them didn't have bosses, but that I also kind of wanted to touch on. And so I won't be as dramatic and start from different sections. But one of the things, like the first Mass Effect, I brought up Saren, and that's kind of how the pinnacle part. What I thought Mass Effect 2 was amazing is the whole final mission, because there's not, if I remember correctly, there's not this big boss at the end.
No.
It's all these little parts that, assuming you pick your characters that you feel are best in these situations.
Well, that's the thing. You know it's a suicide mission going in.
Yeah.
So this whole game kind of leads up to, you have to do this super hard mission.
Yep.
That's not everyone's going to survive. So you have to go around the galaxy creating a team that you think can complete this mission.
Yeah.
And so when it finally happens then, yeah, that's the thing. It's not like, oh, this is a boss battle. It's like, oh, this is a super long, intense mission where you have to keep utilizing aspects of your team, and like more and more gets thrown at you, and it keeps building.
Yeah.
Just when you think it's over, then you have to like split up your team, and they have to go do stuff while you do stuff, and if you don't choose the right character to do that thing, like you have different options, because there's like categories of people, like, oh, there's somebody that can shield, or, oh, you know, we got, you know, an assault guy. So you have to choose both the right one and the guy that's like skilled enough to make those decisions, because they could die doing their part.
Yeah. And I will say I spoiled this level for myself. It could have been more amazing if the internet didn't exist.
Okay. Because you're like, okay, who's the best team to have? Or
so for the most part, I went through, and a lot of them make sense. And what I'll say, like, again, like, you need somebody who's really good at biotic powers.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm not going to put Garrus in there,
obviously,
who has like 1% of biotic powers. You're just like, okay, it's really between these two characters. And that's really what it, like, those are the two characters that if you pick, they'll survive.
Yeah. But I think it's maybe somebody, the idea, before the internet existed, it would probably be like, oh, you have to send somebody off to do something. You might send your favorite character or your strongest character, not realizing that they would have been better to do another part later on. So
yeah, no, for sure. Like, if I didn't know the internet existed, I probably wouldn't have ended with the result that I got.
Yeah.
But that was also one of those fear things of, part of it being like, okay, I mean, this isn't a spoiler. You know, it's a suicide mission.
I mean, we already spoiled it if you didn't know.
If you didn't know it was a suicide mission, it's a suicide mission.
Yeah.
But I also knew when I played 2 that 3 was coming out. So I knew if there was another game. And so I knew that they were going to connect. So essentially I was just like, I want to make sure that my team survives.
Around.
Yeah, because I'm just like, I really like these people. So that's what caused me to look it up, is I'm just like, I don't want the Krogan to die.
Not to mention, I think there's an achievement for not having anybody die.
Oh, okay. Then that probably also helped me.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I don't want the Krogan to die. What is the Krogan good for? What should I select them for? Blah, 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 blah. And go from there. But yeah, I just think that the aspect of playing that part and having all these sections and just being like, I don't know who to choose.
Right.
And then picking the wrong one, maybe by mistake, maybe because you didn't know what the stat it's actually looking for is, and then knowing that your choice ended the life of a character that you may or may not have liked, but at the same time, just like, you have prevented this character from either living on in spirit or from being in the next game.
Right. Like,
and
like you might have already spent 2 games with this character, which is hundreds of hours of gameplay, and like you said, they could have been in the next game if you saved them. Like, you don't even know.
Yeah, and just I think that thing is just that, and games have gotten better about that, is that where choice impacts things, and we can talk about that in a different episode.
Yeah.
But just like that is one that you really felt that you're just like, if I screw up, it's not that I just have to fight more or that I have to hit restart. If you screw up,
they're dead in this universe.
They're dead in this universe.
Yeah.
And whatever part, that you sent them to do, maybe it's to escort some civilians out, or maybe it's to freaking shut down a reactor core. You're just like, not only are they dead, but they didn't do what I sent them to do.
Right, which will make things harder and might cause somebody else to die too that I didn't even realize.
Yeah. So I thought, to me, that was the first level I thought of where I'm just like, yeah, it's not a boss battle.
Yeah.
But it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in a lot of ways so much more effective than just a straight up boss battle. And like, I mean, that's a great game, but what helped it be such a great game is the fact that it ends so strong like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the best mission in all of the Mass Effect games put together.
For sure. I mean, I could go back and play that mission and have just the same amount of fun out of context as I could like the first time playing it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like you fire up, whatever the best mission of 1 is or the best mission of 3, and you're just like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's fine, but it's not as impactful as anything else. So.
Yeah, and that's what made it so great is, I'd say the best mission in 1 is probably the mission where you have to
make a decision.
Yeah, and you have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And that's what made me want to keep playing 1 a second time and get excited for 2 is that mission, but then 2 just blows it out of the water, and you're just like, that planet sucked compared to this one.
Right.
What else do I got? I got, this isn't a boss level. This is just one of my this is clearly like top 5 is Mirror's Edge. And I couldn't remember the name of the level. I could have fired up the game, but I was too lazy. Yeah. I just put the crane level. So if you've played this game, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But what Mirror's Edge is, what I thought made it so great is the free flowing aspects where I felt.
It was the first game to do this. Now every game has free running and parkour and that stuff. So it was the first game that had really dynamic running and jumping and climbing, like even before like an Assassin's Creed and stuff.
Yeah.
And not only was it that, but it was also first person, which was totally different.
It absorbed me to the fact where like running fast, I felt like I was running fast. Yeah. Making these jumps, I was nervous, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like, I felt more into that game than, let's say, playing some of the future games that are more parkour-y.
Yeah.
And just feeling like, especially Assassin's Creed, where it's just like you're guiding him, but you're not the one.
That's true. Because the thing about Assassin's Creed is you kind of can get wherever you need to, however you want. And plus, because it's third person, you can sort of see the next step.
Yeah.
But when you're a first person in Mirror's Edge, it was like you sometimes would make a jump before you knew what your next move was going to be.
Yeah.
So you had to like turn around and grab a wall or do something like that. Like you were figuring it out in real time.
Yeah. Because you're a whole underpowered runner. You're essentially a message delivery lady who's just using the tops of buildings and stuff like that. And sure, there's some guide of like color schemes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your guys are shooting at you. You don't have a gun for the most part.
Yeah.
And so your goal is to get from point A to point B without dying. So you're just running blindly, essentially like making moves up as you go. Trying to figure out a way to get away from them and get safe.
To where you need to go.
And so in fact, the game itself, I'm still blown away at how fun it is gameplay wise. Like that game, like I still think we'll probably do parkour better than future games that can have that as a study aid.
Yeah.
Like sliding under things.
Mirror's Edge 2 supposedly is still in development. So
yeah, but like with the crane level specifically, is long story short, you go through this entire mission. At the very end, there's just one of those giant tall cranes with a little neck and whatever, a swinging ball or whatever you want underneath it, and you're essentially going up this giant, I'll just call it an apartment building. You're going up and up and up, and you're avoiding bad guys and and you can hear them running behind you because it's a small area and they're just following you upstairs. And you get to a point where you're at the top of the building. and you essentially have to jump from building to this narrow crane, and then run up the crane even higher, and then jump from the top of the crane to this other building.
Yeah, and this, like I said, it all happens in real time. Like, you have to make the decision as you're running. You can't stop for a second or pause or look around.
Yeah.
You're just constantly in motion.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, too, because it is kind of like, if you slow down, all of a sudden you're not going to have the momentum to make a jump.
Yeah, or they're going to catch up and shoot you.
But just like, I remember the fear I felt, because you're landing on a narrow ledge, and you have to now run up this ledge in almost a perfectly straight line. It doesn't like lock you in onto the spot. You can easily step over the edge and fall to your death.
Right.
And then just like running and jumping and hearing gunshots behind you, and there's no cutscene or anything. You're just like, and you're just like falling through the air, and amazing. That's all I'll say. Anyone who hasn't played it should play it.
I agree.
I have more.
Please.
Okay. I'll save the
I did not prepare a level situation. That's why Phil is handling this, but hopefully I can contribute a little bit.
I will save my next one, my third one, because I feel like that's the one we'll have maybe...
To discuss more?
Okay. I also have Psychonauts, which I don't think you played. Xbox game, Double Fine, essentially old school platformer, but not 2D. 3D platformer is kind of how I'd sum it up. There's a level, Milkman level. The whole premise of the game is you go in other people's minds and you essentially try and fix them. And you go into this milkman who, in his mind, is more like a CIA agent. So it's a very black and white. But at the same time, there's all these people who think they're CIA agents. And it's just real secretive and just real unique feel to the level. And it's really interesting because, again, the game's cartoony and fun, and so the level's fun itself, but at the same time, like, it's this weird, like, you think you're just going in this crazy milkman, and instead he, like, actually believes that he's doing some higher power.
Yeah, that's one of the games that's always on, like, everybody's, like, most underrated games list, or, like, the best sleeper hits games, so...
I tried to make Caitlin play it, and she did, and she enjoyed it, but it's just more of one of those, like... Okay, it's also an old game. It looks old. It's sometimes it's at that point where it's not old nostalgia old. It's not like putting it in a Super Nintendo game.
It hasn't aged well. Old.
Yeah, it's where you're just like, this is very blocky and a little difficult. My other one, before I go back to the one we'll talk about, I got Super Nintendo Link, just entering the Dark World. For the first time. It's not really a level because it's essentially the whole overworld.
Yeah.
But I thought that was super awesome because now all of a sudden, like, houses that...
Everything's changed. Like, it's the same space, but everything is different.
Yeah. The way you'd normally get to another place is the exact same, but now the bad guys are different. There's different characters lying around. Characters that, statues or... Just everything kind of came to life. And it was really cool just seeing that transition, especially in Super Nintendo age, where you're just like... Wait, I'm used to two guys being here, and now that there are these two, like, enemies. So that was super good. But then I gave me two if that didn't count. Like, we were going to have a consensus.
Right, like someone is sitting here keeping score?
Going Mario 64, Little Big World, I think is what it was called. But essentially you jump into a painting where the roles are reversed. Normally Goombas are small and you're big, and you jump on them, and it's great. And this one, Goombas are gigantic.
They're like building size.
And you're tiny Mario. And you can still jump on them, but then they really squish down. Yeah. And then it's, I don't know, super interesting. My other backup, Mario Kart in battle mode, there's only 4 maps.
Right.
Which was always sad because battle mode was everyone's favorite. But
Except for Jake's.
Except for Jake for some reason. What a weirdo.
Because he's not good at it.
But I think it was Battle Blocks. It probably wasn't called that. But it was essentially 4
different
towers
colors
that are all different colors.
And they have ramps to get up to there's 3 levels. So there's the ground floor, there's like halfway up the tower, and then there's the very top of the towers, which are all connected by a bridge.
Yes. And I remember... I remember getting to the point where me and my friends would play at level, and... we would give each other time. We each had a section, and we would give each other time to
get
set traps on that section before then we would start launching attacks. So like I'd be on red, so I'd like really try and get like as many banana peels as I could, and like try and hide them in spots where I thought people would come. Everyone would kick all their green turtle shells to like the ground floor, so that just became like
they all just
bomb.
pinballs around because they don't stop until they hit somebody or hit a weird corner.
And so then you're just like, all right, everyone's ready. Now let's start battle mode. And it was just crazy amount of fun of just like, you know, who laid the best traps and what ended up happening to you and what ended up killing you.
Yeah, we had a similar gentleman's agreement where some of the spawns, sometimes you'll be facing somebody, but they won't be able to see you, and like there'll be like a question mark in between you guys. And so it was basically like first 30 seconds, minute, nobody is allowed to shoot each other. So
that's, I mean...
Because sometimes you could get a huge advantage just right off the bat and get somebody's balloon away before they had time to respond.
I just remember, like, especially bring up the facing ones, depending on the character, if you ran full speed into them, that would cause them to lose a balloon. So if you were like Wario and somebody else was Toad, you just ran full speed into Toad, Wario never loses a balloon, Toad does. And then so you're like, you get that and you get the question mark.
Game over, man.
Toad's pretty much screwed for that round.
Yeah.
And then going back, the third one, which we can talk about, Halo 1 Finale.
Yep.
Which
is called the Maw.
It's called the Maw.
Yeah.
You drive a warthog through an exploding base to get to a certain section.
To get to a spaceship.
Yeah, that's going to get you out of the base.
Yeah. Basically, you leave one spaceship. I mean, spoiler for a 13, 14-year-old game.
Yeah.
So it's the end of the game. You are in a crashed ship that you fought your way through, and you've created a chain reaction in the reactor to basically nuke itself and blow up the entire planet.
Yeah.
So after you've set this trap, then you get in a warthog, and it's a race against the clock to get to the spaceship both before it leaves and before the planet explodes.
Yep.
While the entire structure is becoming unstable and every enemy that you could think of is standing in your way.
Yeah.
So, it's a race against the clock. It's a race against time. There's all this sort of external pressure they've put on you. And it's not a boss or anything, but it's probably one of the best finales of a game that I can remember playing.
And the reason I put this one and not the third one is because I feel like the third one certainly pulls their entire idea.
Oh yeah, it's a purpose.
Yeah,
they're purposely trying to wink at.
Yeah, they're being like, "Hey, remember this?" And it's fine because the third one was also just as entertaining to do.
Right, and you have to deal with the levels exploding and things are falling out and there's fire and
But yeah, I just remember playing it for the very first time. And again, like you said, like normally you're used to just going around and shooting things and making sure all the enemies are dead, and now you just have this very timer.
Yeah.
And the timer doesn't give you
there's a timer on the screen the entire time, so you know.
Yeah, but it's not like some of them are like get out in 20 minutes and if you hustle you can get out in 5.
Yeah.
This is like you have 5 minutes, and even if you hustle, maybe you're getting out in 3. Like you don't have an insane amount of like leeway to kind of screw around. So you're driving through these obstacles. Your truck can roll.
Yeah,
guys can shoot you out of it.
Yeah, there's so many enemies on screen. Like you're going through like the areas you have to drive are not huge, but it's sort of a big expansive place that you have to cover overall. Also, like there's a lot of obstacles. You can't just go straight the whole time or go left or just weave out of things.
Slalom.
Yeah, like there's columns, there's ramps that lead to nowhere sometimes. Like you have to know a good path to go. Otherwise, you'll flip, you'll lose time.
Yeah.
An enemy will shoot you. You'll hit a rocket guy and flip over. Another fun thing about that level is you get to this landing zone where the ship's supposed to pick you up. You're sitting there waiting for it, and then it gets shot down and explodes. And they're like, okay, you now have 2 extra minutes now to get to the very end of the level to get where there's another ship.
And I was going to say, well, right after that point, the music changes.
Yeah.
And the music becomes this very great score that really, I think, just like pumps you up to the point where you're just like, this is the end of the game. I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to beat it.
Yeah.
And just like, that is when I think Halo and I think like great soundtrack, like that's the song that comes to mind. It's that orchestral score at the very, very end of the game. Not just like the race to that first 5 minutes,
right?
Because then it's just kind of repetitive and it sounds like video game
it's like
music.
filler.
And then you hit this point where it's just like the it's
right.
very like.
Yeah, and then like the drums start kicking in and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Halo has a great soundtrack, and they've won a lot of awards for that. But yeah, a thing that Marty O'Donnell did, which was really cool, was he would basically use the same piece of music but change it. He would add instruments as you got farther along, so it was this sort of crescendo build to this great finale thing.
Yeah, and that's just what I remember. I remember like I don't remember much in the mall up to that point, like the actual walking and shooting and destroying the core, but I definitely remember getting in that Warthog and going through that time and just like, I'm a sweaty guy anyway, but just like not knowing, like obviously the first couple times, like not knowing how long it's going to take you. So like if I flipped over once, I'd be like, restart checkpoint.
Right.
Because I'm just like, I'm not going to make it now.
Yeah.
And then just, going through this and just being like, and then you get to that halfway point and then you're just like, shit, that wasn't it, and then you gotta get in again, and now there's like, and the enemies are at that point are running away from you. They're not even in your way,
because things are exploding and stuff. Except for the very end, the very like final stretches, you have to get out of the Warthog and run on foot to the ship, which is fun too because there's a million flood around you, and like there's a roadblock, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta get out and run, and then you run, and it turns seamlessly into a cutscene.
Yeah, I just thought that was. Super good finale.
We should go upstairs and play it right now. The Master Chief Collection.
I need to get home at some point.
No, I know. I really wish we could just like sit down and play like Halo 1 or Halo 2. That would be fun.
It'd be good.
Yeah.
You have it now.
I do have it. I mean, I've always had it, but I have it now as well.
You have it on Xbox One.
Yeah.
It's not that far out of possibility. So that's all I wrote down for levels, which is all we have for this episode.
I think that was hopefully a decent episode.
Yeah. Normally, here's where we would plug our stuff.
I don't know what's happening right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But because we normally don't do things where people can weigh in, essentially, I would say, like, tell us your favorite boss or your favorite level. And then just, it doesn't have to be a list. It can be.
Right. And once again, like ours, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, this is what I think the best boss is, but just one that you remember, one that sticks with you for a long time. Yeah,
I mean, if you're just like, or just say like, no, yeah, totally, I think Bowser is the best boss, and you nailed it on the head.
Yeah.
I think it's just, and then, if we get some good answers, we'll read them on the next podcast.
Are there any bosses in The Sims?
No, there's no bosses in The Sims.
We're probably not going to get a lot of responses.
Well, the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, that's true. Or just, Mother Nature.
Mother Nature, yeah. Meteorites. There's also no bosses in basketball.
That's true. Yeah.
So I can't be like,
just Pharrell in the new one.
Karl Malone.
Yeah. No, not today. That would be great if Matamo just showed up every once in a while and just rejected the ball. Yeah. He comes out of the stands. Playing. Right, yeah.
That'd be great.
No.
But yeah, tweet us or email us or Facebook us your response or don't. I guess that's kind of how everyone else has been doing.
I mean, they know that's an option. They've exercised that option quite a bit.
Yeah, you're right. So do it. Let us know. You can pick one or the other, or you can do both, or you can do a list.
Or you could just tweet us about anything.
Yeah.
Anything at all. Anything that's happened to you, recently, or, what movies you're into.
Yeah. Or maybe if you like this episode, if you like this format, if you like maybe
that's a good point.
These list episodes, and you're just like, hey, guys, it seems like you want to talk about soundtracks. Why don't you guys do top 5 soundtracks? Or you're like, hey, you guys seem to really like gobbling each other's balls.
You had to get that in there, didn't you?
Yeah, if we didn't, I mean...
We haven't talked about balls this entire episode.
Then you can be like, why don't you do a top 5 ball gobbling? But yeah, any topics, because sometimes there's slow news days.
Right.
And sometimes we're talking about the same games that we're playing, and we're like, maybe this is boring. People don't want to hear me talk about how I've played Grand Theft Auto forever.
Yeah.
People might not want to hear,
Destiny Corner times a million.
So this is a good way to mix it up, but we need feedback in order to continue that.
I actually did have an idea for one other segment that we could do if we had a lull in the conversation, but I haven't figured out the logistics of it yet. We really need like an intern or something because I wanted to do like video game trivia.
Sure.
But there'd be no way for me to look it up without seeing the answer
Yeah.
So we need somebody else to do that for us.
Yeah. Somebody has to be at all of our recordings to do it.
Well, yeah, or find a way to send it to us where it's like, if it's like on the computer, you can do it where it's like the text is white, so you have to scroll over to see what it is.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to do it.
Or texts.
Or just have like huge gaps in between, so I have to scroll down or have a paper in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah, send us. You don't even have to send us the answer if you got.
That's true. Yeah, if you have video game trivia, you can just throw it out at us, and we promise we will not look up the answer before we read it on air.
Yeah, we'll read it. We'll try and answer it, and then we'll look it up after we answer to see if either of us are right.
Yeah.
Or you can provide the answer. I don't know. Whatever. I don't care anymore.
No, don't provide the answer because we'll see that then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like after we read it, but then we'd probably want instant gratification if we
want it in the episode. Otherwise, we're just going to assume we're right about everything all the time.
I'm right.
No, that's it. No, I'm right.
I think the first game was definitely Mass Effect 3.
Yep, I'm pretty sure they started that way, and then it goes backwards. Like
to Pong.
Yeah, it's it's like Star Wars. The fourth was the first one.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, you can tweet us at This Isn't Fun Anymore Podcast or at Not Fun Podcast. Email This Isn't Fun Anymore Podcast.
Website This Isn't Fun Anymore Podcast.com, and we got a Facebook.
Yep.
You know how that works, kids.
Yeah, our website's a Gmail. I didn't get that in before, but people know it's not a Yahoo.
Nobody's going to email us. Like if you're going to respond to somebody that you listen to or anyway, you're probably going to use social media before you sit down and write an email.
I was going to do a bottle message. Message in a bottle. Is that a Police song?
That is a Police song.
And it doesn't sound like that, what I sang.
It's a little bit like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's go play Rock Band.
All right, guys.
See ya.
Peace.
Bye.